He was a 35-year-old billionaire untouched by love and untouched by anyone, not even once, cold by choice. He refused to love her for 2 years. They lived like strangers in a mansion built on silence until one night shattered everything. Welcome to African Tales 3. Please subscribe, leave a like, and share. It means the world to us. Now into the story. The conference room was silent, except for the soft click of Elijah Cain's pen tapping against the table. A dozen eyes watched him across the boardroom, executives, investors, analysts, all waiting for his verdict on a proposed merger. He said nothing. His sharp eyes scanned the digital presentation on the sleek glass screen. A concept for people with time to waste and hearts too fragile to protect. He had never had a girlfriend, never held a hand, never touched. Didn't want to be known. Even casual flirtation felt like intrusion. Cain Tech was Elijah's life's work, and it was slipping through his fingers. Not in numbers or strategy, but in tradition. You need to marry, his father had said one night, swirling bourbon in a cut crystal glass in the family estate study. Elijah's face had been unreadable. Marry? He repeated like the word was foreign. This isn't to barter you like a chess piece. I want to protect what you've built, and this is my proposal. Elijah had met her once, briefly. She was beautiful, poised, eyes with a grace that was almost surgical. He walked away thinking nothing more than she knows how to play the game. 2 weeks later, she moved into Cain Manor, a sprawling mansion with wings so large they could live in the same house and never cross paths. And that was exactly what happened. Elijah took the West Wing. Celeste the East. It felt safer. He didn't need her, didn't want her. This wasn't love, it was duty. And duty he could live with. First time Celeste Hartley walked into Cain Manor, she felt nothing, not awe, not romance. Marble statues stood like guardians along the garden paths. It was a house meant for legacy, not love. She didn't expect warmth. She didn't need it. Inside the grand foyer, the butler offered a nod. Mrs. Cain, he said with grave politeness. She nodded in return, her expression unreadable beneath soft waves of dark hair pinned into an elegant chignon. She wasn't a stranger to wealth. The Hartleys had been silent players in industries that moved nations: oil, manufacturing, politics. Celeste had grown up in power. And yet this silence felt like a shroud. She had hoped, foolishly, that something might stir between them. Even a flicker of connection. But Elijah had looked at her with the same eyes he gave board members, polite, unreadable, distant. He didn't take her to their shared suite. Instead, he walked her to the East Wing. This is your room, here? Said and then he walked away. Celeste stood at the door, hands still on the handle, heart echoing in the marble silence. Days folded into weeks. Weeks into months. And months into 2 silent years. Elijah was a ghost in tailored suits. He left early, came home late, locked himself away in the West Wing's private study. They passed each other in corridors with nods instead of greetings. When guests visited, they played the roles, the poised wife and the composed husband, like seasoned actors. Behind closed doors, there was no intimacy, no conversation. And yet the silence wasn't rejection. It was retreat. He lived behind glass, afraid of what closeness might break in him. All of it made her the perfect wife. For the right man, Elijah Cain was the right man. Not for love, but for strategy. Their parents had arranged it with cold smiles and clinking champagne flutes, calling it visionary. Celeste had nodded, agreed, even smiled. But inside, something folded in on itself. At night, she would sit in front of her dressing table, staring at a formal invitation to a Cain Tech gala. She would dress in sleek navy gowns, pin her hair with the same precision as always, and meet him in the foyer. Elijah stood waiting, crisp and beautiful in a black tuxedo, his eyes flickering over her figure with a brief, unreadable pause. You look elegant. He'd say, thank you. She'd reply, it wasn't affection. But it was a shift. One night, nearing midnight, Celeste stood barefoot by the grand piano. Her silk robe clung softly to her body, a half-finished glass of red wine in her hand. She tried to write in her journal, but found herself staring at the page. She wandered room to room like a ghost. Then a click echoed down the corridor. The unmistakable sound of the main entrance opening. That was strange. Elijah was rarely home before 1 a.m., and even then, he moved like a man trying not to be noticed. But he entered the room. Elijah stood in the doorway, his black suit damp from the rain. For once, he looked less like the controlled CEO and more like a man who had just needed to come home. His eyes locked on hers. "Celeste," he said, and the sound of her name in his voice felt like thunder. Silence fell between them, not awkward, not cold, just charged. Elena's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the piano's edge. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately. "You're awake," he said quietly. "I couldn't sleep." Neither could I. He stood just a few feet away. She noticed something new, the faintest tremble in his hands. Elijah Cain, the man who never cracked. "I don't know anymore," he said. Then, without a plan, without words, he reached out and touched her. Just the lightest brush of his fingers against her wrist, but it set off a storm beneath her skin. Celeste's eyes widened. He didn't pull away. Neither did she. He moved closer, slowly, until they were inches apart. "You're my husband," she whispered. "You're allowed to think about me." His eyes searched hers. "Not like this." Her hands moved of their own will, resting against his chest. She felt the steady beat of his heart. For once, she murmured, "Stop thinking ... and feel." Elijah didn't answer. He kissed her. It was gentle at first, hesitant, like he was afraid he'd break her. But when her lips parted, when her arms wrapped around his shoulders, something inside him shattered. The kiss deepened, raw, consuming. They moved together like instinct. Like gravity had been waiting for this moment. Gasps, open palms, pressed bodies. And beneath it all, reverence. Later, when morning arrived, golden and cruel, Celeste lay on her side, the sheet drawn halfway up her bare back. Her body tangled in silence and confusion. Elijah was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed. Controlled, guarded, distant. When she whispered his name, he flinched almost imperceptibly. "I have to go," he said. "There's a board meeting." She nodded. But when he turned and said, "Whatever that was, I shouldn't have let it happen," her heart broke. "You want to pretend it never happened?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes." And then he walked out. The hours after stretched long and empty. Celeste didn't leave her room for most of the day. The house was large enough for their silence to remain undisturbed. But everything had changed. A hallway where their hands had brushed, the door to her bedroom. The piano. She sat at her vanity, brushing her hair, whispering, "I won't beg for what you already feel," because she knew he felt it. He just didn't know what to do with it. Elijah didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in the West Wing, haunted by her voice, the shape of her in candlelight, the way her laughter sounded when she forgot to be composed, the smell of her shampoo. She had looked at him like he was a man worth something, and that terrified him. Because deep down he didn't believe he was. The silence returned, but it was different now. Thicker, charged. The kind of quiet that builds before a thunderstorm. They slipped back into routine like dancers repeating old steps. Spoke only when their calendars forced them to. Retreated to their separate wings at night. But now when their eyes met, there was tension behind the poise. Cracks, pressure. Elijah found himself lingering in the kitchen while she passed through. In the mornings, he noticed how her fingers curled around her teacup, how she always blew gently before sipping. Celeste felt his presence behind her when she stood at the window. When their hands brushed, neither moved. It all built until the charity gala. The ballroom shimmered beneath chandeliers like a sky full of stars. Celeste arrived in silver, her hair swept into soft curls, her eyes aglow. She looked radiant, powerful, poised. Elijah noticed her the moment she stepped out of the car. And something inside him shifted. She was no longer just his wife. She was the woman he wanted. And fear. Inside, a man named Julian, mid-30s, too smooth, leaned a little too close as he spoke to her, touched her arm. She didn't pull away. Elijah felt something primal ignite. He cut into the conversation without apology. "Celeste?" he said, voice low. "The driver is waiting." Julian chuckled. "Don't worry, Cain, I'll keep her company." Elijah's jaw flexed. "That won't be necessary." Celeste. Lips parted, then a small, unreadable smile. "Of course," she said. "Let's go." The ride home was a vacuum of tension. Neither spoke until they reached the grand staircase. "You don't get to do that," she said, voice calm but cold, drag me away like you have the right to be jealous. He blinked. Do what? She stepped closer. You told me to forget what happened. Now you act like it meant something. I don't want to care, he whispered, suddenly exposed. But I do. I can't stop thinking about you. She froze. Her pulse throbbed. I'm like a damn addict, he said. I look at you and forget everything I ever believed about love. I told you to pretend it didn't happen, she said. Because I was scared, he confessed. He reached for her hand, this time with certainty. But pretending doesn't work. She looked at their joined hands, then into his eyes, and without saying another word, she led him up the stairs. This time, there was no guilt. They fell asleep tangled in warmth and secrets. The change wasn't explosive. It crept in like spring sunlight, slow and impossible. To ignore Elijah began to stay. To linger, to breathe, he stopped disappearing behind closed doors. Sat at the kitchen island while she made tea. Stood beside her in the garden. Asked about her day, and she didn't rush to fill the silence. She let him be present, close. One rainy afternoon, Celeste caught a cold. He sat beside her on the couch, her head on a pillow, tissues beside her tea. You're not as cold as you pretend. She murmured, drowsy. He didn't respond, but he reached for her hand and didn't let go. A week later, they walked together through the estate gardens. She paused under the old elm tree. You were always so contained, she said. Like no one could touch you, not physically. Emotionally, he looked at the path ahead. Loneliness dressed up in control. She faced him. I want this. Not just the house, not just the name, you. He took her face in both hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones. I'm already trying, he whispered. I just don't know how to be loved. That night, they shared a bed again, but not out of desire, out of belonging. She fell asleep with her head on his chest, and he traced soft circles along her spine, marveling that this warmth was real. He used to believe the stars could answer questions if he stared long enough. But now, lying beside her, he whispered into her hair, You're not who I thought you were. She murmured, Who did you think I was? A wall, he sighed, made of glass, beautiful, cold, impossible to reach. She looked up at him, her eyes soft. And now? Now I see the woman behind it, he whispered. Cain Manor, with its endless halls and cold grandeur, began to feel different, warmer. Like a storybook palace that had just remembered how to love. In the drawing room, a fire crackled softly. Celeste stood barefoot on the rug, wearing one of Elijah's oversized sweaters and thick socks. He entered without knocking. He didn't knock anymore. She smiled as he approached. He took the mug from her hand and kissed her forehead. What had once terrified them had become home. They shared a bed every night, woke up wrapped around each other like roots growing in the same soil. And yet, there were still things unspoken. One thing especially, hovering between them like breath and cold air. A few days later, Elijah surprised her. Where would you want to go? He asked. If it was just us. She hesitated. The lake house? She said. He looked up. You haven't mentioned it. In years, I know. I didn't think you wanted to go back. I didn't, until now. The drive was long, winding through frost-covered fields. Elijah's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. He didn't say much, but Celeste didn't press him. Something was shifting in him, she could feel it. The lake house sat at the edge of a still, frozen lake. A chimney puffed smoke into the blue winter sky. Inside, Celeste wandered slowly, her fingers brushing old books, faded photographs, traces of a life she hadn't been part of. Elijah stood quietly by the fireplace, staring at a woman in a picture frame. Your mother? She asked gently. He nodded. She died when I was 19, cancer. It was quick. She slipped her hand into his. He didn't look at her, but he held on tightly. That evening, after dinner in firelight and silence, they stepped outside. The stars scattered above them in breathtaking clarity. I used to believe, he said, breath curling in the cold, that if I stared at the stars long enough, they'd give me answers. And now? She asked, leaning her head against his shoulder. He looked down at her. Now I know the answers are here. Her cheeks were red from the cold, her eyes bright. I've never said this to anyone, he said, barely above a whisper. But I love you, Celeste. She went still. He continued, voice shaking. I built walls to keep the world out, to keep you out. But you made it impossible. Her eyes shimmered. I love the way you hum when you're thinking. The way you look at people when you're really listening. I love how you laugh when you're tired and how you still light candles even when no one's watching. He let out a shaky breath. I was so afraid of needing anyone. But now I need you more than I need air. She touched his face, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. He pulled her into him like a man clutching salvation. They kissed beneath the stars, slow, reverent. A meeting of souls more than bodies. When they returned to the lake house that night, they didn't make love. They kept love, protected it, like a secret written in their skin. The next morning, Elijah woke before sunrise. Celeste was curled into his side, her breathing soft and steady. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone, he was hers. And she was his. No contracts, no arrangements. No games. Just love. Spring arrived like a whispered promise. Elijah no longer retreated to the West Wing. His study remained a sanctuary, but it no longer served as a fortress. Celeste became part of everything. Their mornings began with quiet laughter. Their evenings ended with reading, fingers entwined, legs tangled beneath shared blankets. The house was no longer silent in a cold way. It was full of peace. One afternoon, sunlight spilled through the conservatory. Celeste sat in the armchair, her eyes closed, a forgotten book in her lap. Elijah watched her, quiet awe in his chest. He stepped out, returned minutes later with something small in his hand. What's that? She asked sleepily. He knelt. It's a ring, he said, but not for duty. This one. You choose for yourself. Her breath caught. I love you, he said again, and I want to marry you, really. No boardrooms, no bloodlines, just you. You're the only home I've ever had. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Yes, they didn't need a minister or a guest list. Every touch was a vow. Every whispered conversation at midnight, a promise. Weeks later, Celeste stood in the bathroom staring at a pregnancy test. 2 lines. She walked to him as he buttoned his cuffs. Slid the test into his palm. He looked from the stick to her, speechless. She smiled. We're going to be parents. He didn't say a word. Just pulled her into his arms, kissed the top of her head, and whispered, I didn't think I could have this. A life, a family, you. Their daughter was born on a quiet October morning. Elijah held her in his arms, silent tears slipping down his face. You're not alone anymore, Celeste whispered, touching his cheek. He looked at her, eyes full. I know, he said. Years later, Cain Manor echoed with laughter. A little girl with bright eyes danced through the halls. Celeste painted in the sunroom. Elijah right beside her, their legs touching, their hands occasionally brushing. House that began in silence had bloomed with love, and it was only the beginning. We've reached the end of the story. If it touched you, please leave a like and subscribe. And remember, even the coldest hearts can find their fire when they stop surviving and start letting themselves be loved.